This is the Fire Ecology Learning Lab. This is a middle school curriculum to really delve into wildland fire, which, as we all know, is an increasingly important topic for kids to understand and have some knowledge of, especially here in the Southwest. I know that many of us have been directly impacted or indirectly impacted by fire, either through loss of property or just through smoke and some of the damage that can cause to people's health. So one of the underlying core tenets of this curriculum is that we really want to take a trauma-informed approach. So I'm starting with this because I don't want to assume that any of you haven't been impacted by fire. So it's important that when you do a workshop like this, or when you teach this in your classroom, that you make the assumption that anyone in there could have had losses from fire or had an emotional response that they'll have to discussing fire, and especially wildland fire. So when you're doing this in your classroom, we really recommend that you let students and families know that you're going to be teaching this. Send home a letter. We have a draft letter that you can use. Don't ask students to discuss or explain or tell about experiences they've had that are negatively impactful, that relate to fire, that can actually trigger them to relive some of the trauma. Create a safe space that if you have students that have been impacted by fire, that you have somewhere either in your classroom, in the hallway, or in another teacher's room, that they can remove themselves if it gets to be too much and they have a negative reaction. Have resources ready and have a plan with your counselor, especially if you're in a place that has had a direct impact by fire. I know we've got a couple teachers today that are from Mora, and you all have had a lot of kids and a lot of teachers that have lost things and family and land to fire. And then the final piece is helping students move forward and creating a plan and projects and ways that they can kind of recover from that trauma. So I really wanted just to put that out there first, because I think that I want to use that same trauma approach today. If there's anything that we get to that you're feeling uncomfortable or need to take a step away, please do so and take care of yourself. If there's anything you'd like to share, you're welcome to, but don't feel like we're putting you on the spot and that you have to share anything. And then as we go through some of the fire lessons, if there's images or issues that you have and you want to let us know that there were certain things that you thought were really triggering, that you think we should rethink in the curriculum, please let us know that as well, so that we can make some of those changes. Any questions about trauma-informed approach?
No.
Okay, thanks. I always try to do that 10-second wait time, you know. We've all been trained for that. So just a quick overview of today. If you're in New Mexico, we're going to be going really from 9 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. If you're in Arizona, we'll be finishing about 12:30. We will do breaks at least once an hour, and we'll do a little bit longer break right around noon New Mexico time or 11 Arizona time. We'll also be doing breakout sessions so that you all can be talking to each other. An overview of kind of our layout for today. We'll do some introductions, both of ourselves and our sponsoring organizations. We've talked about the trauma-informed approach, and we'll do a little bit of an overview of the curriculum. We'll discuss where we live and do a little outdoor investigation, discuss New Mexico and Arizona biotic communities. I don't know why I missed Arizona there. We'll do some small group discussions. We'll discuss fuel properties, finish reviewing the rest of the curriculum, and then talk about how you can have visitors either from the Forest Service or other organizations come to your classroom and do some of the activities with you, and then closing and a little evaluation. So I am going to start by putting you all on the spot and having you share your name, your school and grade or organization and role. So depending on if you're at a nonprofit or if you're at a school, what you're hoping to get out of today. And then just briefly, if you think fire is good or bad and why you say that. So I'm gonna get off of this screen. So, ooh. Let me stop sharing here. I'm going to put this in chat so that everybody remembers what they're supposed to talk about. Oh, and we still have just our small group. Well, that's fine. So Carmen, you want to start? Oh, and we can't hear you, Carmen. So I'm going to come back to you because it looks like maybe there's a microphone issue. If you're having trouble with the microphone and you want to put it in chat, that's fine too. But otherwise, I'm going to go on to Abigail.
Hello, good morning again. So my name is Abigail Saludares, and I teach 6th and 7th grade science at Nucom Middle School here in Nucom, New Mexico. And yeah, I want to learn about this topic so that I can apply it into my classroom, into my lessons. Soon we will be talking about natural resources, and then we will talking about ecology. And so I believe that this topic would be, this training, this seminar would be helpful, so I can share it with my students too. And I think about fire. Fire is good. When Miss Molly posted this question, the first thing that came into my mind is during the winter. So it keeps us warm. Cook, help with cooking food. So that's the first thing that came into my mind, to keep us warm, especially during the winter. Since in my home country we don't have winter, so when we came here we experience winter. So that's the first thing. It's bad, especially during the summer. And last year when we no, not last year, just recently we experienced wildfires, and wildfire was one of our topic in our lesson. I had my 6th and 7th graders talked about wildfires last year and how it affects air pollution. And so I would say in that sense, fire is bad because it literally spreads so quickly, especially if the temperature or the weather is um um good, I should say, for it to spread quickly. So fire is both good and bad, I should say.
Thank you so much, Abigail. Jennifer.
Hello, excuse me. I'm Jenny Sternheim. I work with Hawks Aloft in Albuquerque, which is a nonprofit that does raptor rescue and education to school children. And I am the educator. So the main thing I'm looking to get out from today would be a more structured program to talk about fire ecology with the students. And in regards to like not wildlife, ecology, fire can be good in that, because that it can be part of like the natural life cycle of an area, especially here in the Southwest, where it can happen frequently and naturally, where it can sort of restart an area. So after like a fire comes through, then new plants will start growing and it'll become like a whole different landscape after that. And also in regards to agriculture, people will do like controlled burns for their fields and stuff for the same reason, to sort of restart that area. But of course, if it is an uncontrolled fire that spreads really quickly, as it can happen, then it would not be the best thing. So yeah, thank you. You're still muted. We still can't hear you.
I don't know why I kept clicking on the mute. Maybe I was remuting myself.
There you go.
Okay, I'm reading Carmen's now because her microphone is having trouble. Hi, my name is Carmen Sandoval. I teach middle school science 6th through 8th. I'm a MESA co-sponsor, which is a great program. If you don't know about it, you can ask Carmen during one of the breaks. I think this is a timely topic with the wildfires that have occurred in our area in northern New Mexico. I think fire is good because a majority of people in our area heat our homes with fire, but I acknowledge that can also be dangerous when mismanaged. Thank you so much for that, Carmen. Jeannie, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me or not. I was just typing in the chat. I'm actually going to be commuting for just a little bit this morning. So this will be the last time I can respond until probably, I don't know, 10-ish when I get to my library. But hold on. I was just typing it out. So let me just read what I wrote so I can remember. Oh, I lost it all. Okay, never mind. So my name is Jeannie Miller. I am a 6th grade, well, I've taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science at Cleveland Middle School in Albuquerque. And what do I want to get out of today? Well, I was looking through the resources, and there's some really fantastic stuff that I can use when we get to our natural hazards unit for 6th grade. So I'm looking forward to that. I always love having like interactive notebooks and stuff. As far as is fire good or bad, fire is essential, and our particular environment is meant to burn. Like a lot of our plants, a lot of our ecosystem is required. Burning is essential for them. And so I think a lot of times what happens is human interference, human management, human misplaced mitigation attempts cause a lot of the problems that we have to deal with. So that's my opinion on fire. It is bad though. I live in the mountains, and we were impacted by the Doghead Fire in New Mexico. I live near Chile, so it was down there. We were impacted by that fire 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I can't even remember anymore. And it was very traumatic. You know, we evacuated for a week, and we had to find places to get our animals out, and we had like a very short amount of time to do that in, and that sort of thing. So I have a big interest, especially living in the mountains, in fire. So I'm really looking forward to this class.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. And we look forward to hearing from you again at 10. Gloria.
I am sorry, I was kicked out by, I was kicked out from because we don't have connection. I think there's something wrong in our area. So I am Gloria Marinas, 7th to 8th grade science teacher in Newcomb Middle School, Newcomb, New Mexico. So what I want to get from this one is more knowledge of how to prevent and how to mitigate fire. And for whether fire is good or bad, that depends on how we use it. We know so well that fire is so important for us, like heating our houses. We also heat ourselves whenever we are camping out. So that's it. And for the bad thing is, if we consider the whole community, or let's say we have forest fire, that is so much of a negative impact on the whole community. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you so much, Gloria. And I appreciate everybody's kind of nuanced understanding of how fire can be good and bad. I know it's kind of a simplistic question, but I think it can start a lot of really great conversations. And you can imagine your kids being asked that and the discussions they could have in their table groups. Paul, I know that you're unable to use your mic or camera, so I don't know if you have anything you want to drop in chat, and I'm happy to read it to people. What organization you're with, your school, and what grade you're teaching. And so while you're getting that typed, I'm going to switch to Apple here. Apple, do you want to just introduce yourself real quick too?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Apple Snyder. I'm the education coordinator for the Southwestern region of the Forest Service. What I'm looking to get out today is to actually spend some more focused time with this curriculum. I've been chatting with Molly and the folks at the Southwestern Fire Consortium who funded the curriculum for quite a while now, and been really excited because this curriculum is timely, and it's something we really need for our students to learn to better understand and respect fire, and also even to consider the sorts of careers that there can be in fire and natural resources. And so I'm really thrilled that someone with the expertise and skills and talent that Molly has is able to lead this workshop and put together this curriculum. And then, yes, fire is a force of nature to be respected, and that would be my general comment. Thank you so much.
Great, Apple. Thank you so much. So I'm gonna give Paul just one more second to see if he gets something in chat. And it looks, so Paul, as soon as that gets in chat, I'll kind of interrupt myself, and we will come back to you. So next thing, I'm going to start screen sharing here again. So we've introduced ourselves and sort of thought a little bit about some of the complexities around fire. I do want to just acknowledge two of the funders of this curriculum. So it was funded by the Southwest Fire Science Consortium. And so there's different fire science consortiums around the United States. Ours covers this area here. So all of Arizona and New Mexico, a little bit of Texas, and then the very southern part of Utah and the Four Corners area. So their goal is to connect the data and the research that's happening at a university level and with scientists to the way that policymakers and those who are actually working out on the land make decisions about how they manage fire, wildland fire, fuel, all these different things, and helping pair up those scientists and managers. However, they also have another goal, which is to educate the public about how fire should be managed in our region. So this is something that they commissioned this curriculum. It's 10 lessons, and we'll get into those in a minute. But it's a way of connecting with youth and teachers and families and making sure that there's a general understanding of the complexities of wildland fire, especially in our region. So this specific workshop is funded by the Forest Service. I'm going to turn it back over to Apple.
Thanks, and hello again. So you can see on the screen what this is our mission, and our mission, where our Forest Service lands are across the country are really set up to support this. So they're about 193 million acres, which is about the size of Arizona and New Mexico combined, that the Forest Service manages. And when the Forest Service started over 100 years ago, was formed, the primary goal and the primary desire from the public was timber supply and healthy watersheds. And while that remains, and certainly 20% of clean water in the U.S. comes from national forest lands, there's more. There's definitely more of an interest in public engagement, in recreation, and in more careful management of lands to balance a number of considerations. Next slide, please. And so in support of that, one of the things that we do is engage with youth and the general public in terms of conservation education. We do outreach and youth engagement. And so the two photos on the left are, the one on the top left is a young man who's on part of a youth crew that was collecting seeds. And then you can see the hand sorting seeds on the bottom. And some of those are used for restoration efforts. We can help support field trips. And on the upper right, you see a tabling event. We do a number of sort of outreach and tabling events. If you're in the greater Albuquerque area, we are at the New Mexico State Fair through tomorrow. So come visit us there. And we do some of this work on our own. But really, in a lot of these situations, we bring expertise and we depend on partners and others to be the experts, people like Molly. And like our friends at Environmental Education of New Mexico and Arizona Association for Environmental Education. And so those two links on the bottom there, I'll put those in the chat. Those are for the State of Outdoor and Environmental Learning. And that's a project we worked on with the Arizona and New Mexico organizations to inventory a number of the environmental and outdoor learning programs and curricula that are available across the region. And so that's a place that you can go, and there are maps and there's all sorts of information, and you can connect to organizations through that. I'm pretty certain that Hoxaloft is in there, for example. And it's a place where you can maybe find folks to come to your classroom or curricula that you might be able to implement along with fire ecology. And I want to be sure to mention that the contents of that database it's not Forest Service information, it's public information, and it's primarily nonprofit organizations that have contributed to it. So it's an effort to uplift all the people in the communities across the region who are doing this really important work and helping people connect to nature and learn about and appreciate natural resources. Next slide, please. And then I wanted to invite you all, many of you probably know very well, certainly some of you who it sounds like live very close to forest know what your home forest is. My home forest is Santa Fe. That's where I live. My husband is a 3rd, 4th grade teacher up here. And so I'd invite you all, if you have a second, to find your home forest, if you don't know it already, which forest is closest to you, and put it in the chat. And then there's a link where you can go if you want to visit the forest on your own, or if you're interested in a field trip, that could be a possibility. And then I am looking forward to participating in the workshop today with all of you, and then I'll have a little bit to share towards the end as well. Great, I see we've got Jenny close to the Cibola. Yeah, and Molly, you're close to the Santa Fe. Jeannie, Cibola as well. Great. Well, thank you all so much. And Molly, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Apple. Really appreciate it. I'm going to return to Paul here, who just dropped his information in chat. So I'm going to read that really quickly. So Paul Waters here, current informal educator in Ohio, give presentations to all levels of schools and organizations, snowboard now between Ohio and Arizona, past geography and recreation professor for Maricopa Community Colleges. Oh, cool. Also past U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service firefighter, ground tanker, and heliTAC AZ, New Mexico, Wyoming. Apache site graves, Gila National Forest, 1988 Yellowstone fires. Oh, those are actually discussed specifically in this curriculum. Looking to supplement what I know about teaching about fire. Thanks for including me. Thanks so much, Paul. It sounds like you'll have a lot to add today. So please drop stuff in chat as we're going along. And then if you get a chance, follow those links that Apple just dropped in chat. which give those maps of where outdoor learning opportunities are happening in Arizona and New Mexico. Okay. So let's dive into the curriculum a little bit. So what is the Fire Ecology Learning Lab middle school curriculum? So like I said earlier, this is something that was commissioned by the Southwest Fire Science Consortium. They really wanted something that was an easy resource that teachers could use in their classrooms without a lot of materials, without having to like check out a trunk or anything like that. So all of the lessons have low or no cost. Everything is free and downloadable. I think the most expensive thing that we ask you to get, if you can get it, are those aluminum turkey pans, which you can find on sale for not very much money. All of these follow the NGSS, the New Mexico STEM Ready Standards, and the Arizona Science Standards. And then, like I said, it's all free to download, and we'll go through where you can find it at the end. So I think everyone here, it sounds like no one needs convincing about wildland fire and why it's an important thing to address. But number one, it's a really engaging topic for students. I know that fire is one of those things that kids are both fearful of and attracted to. This is a way of integrating a lot of really rich topics, from engineering challenges to biology to chemistry. It's really relevant in our region specifically. And it allows students to really engage, especially in some of the later lessons that ask them to think about how fire is managed in our region, and think about how they can become a citizen and advocate for the way that they think that fire should be managed in our region. So a quick overview of materials. Each lesson includes a lesson plan, which follows the 5E model. Let me show you what that looks like really quickly. So at the top of the lesson, you'll see the estimated time, the guiding questions, the science standards, and the related learning goals, a list of materials for the students and a list of materials for the whole class, vocabulary. Then it goes into the 5E kind of layout of the lesson. So the engagement, each activity comes with a little sort of hook to get the kids engaged and to activate prior knowledge, gives them time to explore, gives resources to help explain, gives an opportunity to elaborate, and always has some sort of evaluation piece at the end that helps them reflect back on what they've learned. There's some teaching notes with alternatives, prep that needs to happen before class, and then it really delves into the curriculum and ideas of how to differentiate the lessons. So each of the lessons looks like that, and you'll be able to download a full set of all the lessons in sort of a teacher notebook that is available. At the beginning of that, there's also a layout of the goals, the standards. So hopefully this makes it a lot easier for you to use, and that you can justify it with your principals or whoever's kind of looking over your shoulder as you're teaching. Any questions about lesson plans? Great. In addition, there's handouts and homework, presentation materials for the kids to use, readings, everything you need should be provided here. Everything's available in multiple formats, which I'll go over at the end, but those include Canvas, an interactive lab notebook, Google Classroom, and then printable. Everything's aligned with standards. And as I said earlier, activities are all low or no cost. So this is an example of what some of the readings look like. You'll notice that keywords are often in bold, or words that the kids are probably unfamiliar with are in bold, and there's an entire glossary that goes with this. There's note-taking pages, graphing activities. So it really should tie into ELA, math. It kind of goes across the board. So there's 3 primary themes that are addressed in this unit. The first is understanding the biotic communities in Arizona and New Mexico. The second is understanding wildland fire and what it is and how it interacts with those biotic communities. And then the third is wildland fire management and how humans kind of interact with the environment around us and fire. Man, my mouse is very jumpy today. It keeps skipping forward. So lesson 1, and we'll get into all of these in more detail here in a minute, but students will research different biotic communities, which are basically different ecosystems around our region, and use those to create a mural. And then they go outside, they try to figure out, after they've learned about all the biotic communities, what is the biotic community that they live in, and find evidence for that. And then they compare and contrast fire, cellular respiration, and decomposition, and how those are all part of the same process happening at different time speeds. These are the biotic communities that we cover. I've had a request to potentially add riparian and alpine to this, so those may be coming out if we can get funding to add those in the next year. But the ones that we cover now are desert scrub, which is kind of like what we see down in the southern parts of the state, desert grasslands, interior chaparral, sagebrush shrublands, or sometimes called sagebrush steppe, oak woodlands, pinyon juniper woodlands, ponderosa forests, and mixed conifer forests. In theme 2, this is when we really start to get into fire. So always starting with a classroom fire safety and a trauma-informed approach, and making sure that you have really clear guidance around that. Getting into wildland fuel properties, doing an experiment where you actually do a controlled little burns that happen in trays, which I think is probably the kids' favorite thing. You know, most kids really enjoy setting things on fire. So that's why you start off with the safety piece and then do the fire burning. They then go back and revisit the biotic community they researched in lesson 1 and think about fire adaptations. They get into designing their own fire experiment and conducting that. And then they finally use all of the data that they've collected to determine what fire regime they have in their biotic community. And we'll go over all of this in a lot more detail, so don't feel like you're having to jot down too many notes right now. Finally, in theme 3, they get really down into how do humans interact with these different topics? How do humans interact with fire and the wildlands around them? So students look at historical fire management, including all the back to some of the ways that Pueblo peoples have managed fire in wildland spaces, and doing a tree ring exploration, doing some readings about kind of different phases of fire management. And then in lesson 9, they each take on a role and they do a city council debate and debate whether or not there should be a controlled burn in their region. And this is one that if you're living somewhere where there's been controlled burns that have become large fires, this is one that you might want to think about how you conduct that. And then finally doing a letter to wildland fire managers and writing how they think that fire should be managed in their region. So any questions before I kind of jump into the lessons with more detail?
No.
I'm going to come off, give people an opportunity to chime in if anybody wants to chime in.
Molly, if I understand correctly, I think you've been piloting this a bit with some teachers. And so I'm curious what you've been hearing from teachers and students.
Yeah, so we have piloted it over the last year. Thanks for that question, Apple. overall, they've been pretty happy with it. There's a few tweaks that we've made to the curriculum over the summer there were a couple things that teachers found a little bit confusing to do with their students. So we've made a few edits to some of the lessons. So far from teachers, we've heard it's a good balance between doing research and reading and hands-on activities. But I'll be really interested to hear from you all what you think as well. So this isn't like a static document that we can never change. This is something that we're continuing to add to and alter. And one of the other pieces that we've just added, or are in the process of adding, I should say, we're including animals as well. So we got some funding from the Southwest or the New Mexico Game and Fish Department to add information about animals that are either endangered or threatened or species of concern across the region. So now there's readings about those and their interaction with fire as well. And that was a request from teachers that they wanted. Plants are great and all, but they wanted animals as well.
Thanks, Molly. And as a wildlife biologist / fire ecologist, I love the wildlife too.
And there's a big range. So it's everything from snails to wolves to chipmunks to a bunch of different kinds of birds and snakes. So whatever kind of interests that the kids have, there's an animal to meet it. I'm not sure how many kids are into snails, but hopefully more after this.
Great.
Any other questions? Cool. Well, I'm going to jump back into the curriculum then. So like I said, in lessons 1 and 2, students work in small groups. So I really picture this as being their lab groups in the way that you have it set up. Groups of 2 or 3 kids working together. And all of the readings and everything else work in those small groups. A lot of the readings, there's like 3 different versions for kids to do and then come back with their partners to share with each other, which is all explained in the curriculum. But if you've got questions about that, please feel free to contact me. So students work in small groups. Each of the small groups becomes an expert in a different biotic community and the plants and animals that are a part of that community. And then they teach the rest of their class about what their biotic community is, what makes it special, what kind of plants and animals it has, what kind of climate it has, where it's found. And then they use that information to make a mural, which is like a model of all of the biotic communities across New Mexico and Arizona. I recommend doing that using, doing it by elevation so that they can see the ways that those different biotic communities kind of overlap and bleed into one another. Then in lesson 2, they've learned about all the biotic communities in the region, and they go outside and they do an investigation looking at what kind of plants and animals they can find there, and then trying to match where they live with the biotic communities that are across the region. So it's always fun when we're involved in one of these projects that instead of just sitting in front of a computer, I'm actually going to send you all outside to do a little bit of an exploration yourself. So we're going to do about 15 minutes here. So take a 5-minute break for yourself and then about 10 minutes outside. And I want you to walk around and record what you notice. Look for plants. It doesn't matter what the name of the plant is, but I want you to record what types of plants are you finding? Are you finding trees? Are you finding grasses? Lots of cacti, lots of shrubs. See if you can find a region that is, car with a high school child who can confirm she loves snails. Excellent. Thanks, Jeannie. I appreciate that. And thanks for your high school individual who's also participating. And if you have any ideas, please do chime in, because the more people we have chime in, the better. So see if you can find any insects or animals or birds. Record what you notice. What do you see? What size are they? What do they look like? Once again, don't worry so much about what they're called, but use your descriptive language. What do you see at a distance? So if you look up towards the horizon, do you see big mountains? Do you see flat? Do you see rolling hills? What do you see nearby? What does the local landscape look like? And then other clues that would help you determine your biotic community. And then once we're going to come back about 10 a.m. and I'm going to then have you reflect in small groups about what you've noticed. So any questions about what we're doing? So I'm going to drop this in chat in case you are trying to remember what it is. So think about categories of plants, animals, insects and birds, what you see at a distance, nearby, and then clues that would help you determine your biotic community. And just a reminder, biotic communities are those kind of ecosystems that I named earlier. So grasslands, desert, desert, etc. And we'll return back to those when you all get back. So please be back here at 10 a.m. if you're in New Mexico, or 9 a.m. if you're in Arizona. And I will be here if anybody wants to talk anything over. Okay, everyone, welcome back. I've had a couple people drop what they're noticing in chat, which is awesome. Thank you for doing that. So any thoughts about what you all are seeing? I'll read the ones that, so Carmen, I know, was unable to unmute, was unable to use her mic. I'm going to read hers. Carmen says, I see plants, native plants and weeds, exclamation mark. I know it's a bad year for weeds, Carmen. Our garden, chilies, tomatoes, grasses and trees, pinyon, cottonwoods and peach trees. I see the irrigation ditch, which runs along our property. I also see sunflowers, which are a lot smaller this year than previous years. I see mesas in the distance. And then I think somebody else, Abigail, do you want to unmute yourself and say what you say, or say what you see, or do you want me to read it?
Oh, yes. I am in Montezuma, Utah as of the moment, and I can see grasses, trees, and I can see hills nearby, mountains at the distance. I can see rocks. Some of them are big and small, very plain fields, very dry grounds, less plants. Most of them are dried. I can see some blackbirds flying around. That's it. That's how I observe.
Thank you so much, Abigail. Would anyone else like to share what they're noticing? Go ahead and
excuse me. So I'm here in Albuquerque. So on the east side, we have the mountain, which has a lot of more taller trees and a lot of plant growth. And then as you look towards the west, it just goes out into the valley and like very flat, dry desert. And where we are right now is sort of like in between, where it's like a much shorter bushes, not as many tall trees naturally growing, a lot of grass. We have a lot of doves here, different raptors flying around, songbirds. Yeah, lots of reptiles. Yeah, plants that don't need as much water, and some cacti that grow around, but smaller, not like saguaros or anything.
Yeah, we'll know we're in trouble when we start seeing saguaro in Albuquerque. Other people who'd like to share what you see? Oh, Gloria.
Yeah, I see around my garden plants. We have the sunflower, domesticated and wild. I have some tomatoes, lavender, and palm plants. I also see sweet potatoes, cactus, and shrubs. Shrubs are just less number. Insects, I see big ants, some dogs around of our neighbors. What I see at the distance is vast flat land, rock formation, less trees, mesa. We have structures like houses and what else? School building. What I see nearby, we have less trees, houses around because we are staying at the housing. We have school building. We have cars from afar. Oh, nearby, pebbles, sandy soil, grasses too. So clues that, do I need to answer this? The clues that
Not
would
yet.
help.
We'll get there. We'll get there next.
Okay,
Don't worry.
that's all.
But yeah, this is perfect. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Anyone else want to share?
So when I look out, this is Corey from Phoenix, from Audubon. When I look outside, I see a whole bunch of 3-4 different species of lizards running around. I have Cuparosa. I actually saw a carpenter bee this morning. There are tons and tons of doves. There's mesquite trees, palo verde, ironwood. And that's all telling me that I'm located here in the Sonoran Desert.
Thanks so much, Corey. Annie?
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm in Flagstaff. I just went into my backyard real quick. And so I have ponderosa pines and aspens and some maple trees, but I'm not sure what kind. So, and then I saw a bird, but I couldn't tell what kind of bird it was because it was kind of far away. But I didn't really see a lot of animals and no insects. I think it's a little too chilly. I don't really have anything in the distance except for my neighbors.
Thanks, Annie. Anyone else want to share?
Sure. In my backyard, I saw a number of things that are similar to what others have shared. So a couple of things that were a little different was that there was, I saw a bird that I don't typically see, and I wasn't entirely sure what it was. And then I was watching it and I saw it come down and grab what looked like a little insect on the ground. So that gave me a clue to, maybe what type of bird it might be in a general sense. And then another thing I noticed nearby was thinking about the built landscape and seeing a number of homes and a little shopping center and thinking about a lot of those, a lot of the weeds that I'm seeing and hardscape and how that contributes to everything.
Anyone else want to share? Okay, I counted to 10. If you want to chime in the future, you're totally welcome to. So I want to just tease out a little bit of what I heard you all talking about. It seemed like some of you were discussing things that were maybe there naturally. And then sometimes people were talking about things that maybe were planted, like tomatoes. I'm pretty sure, unless you live somewhere pretty special, that tomatoes are not a naturally occurring plant that just springs up and grows. So one of the things that, especially as you're doing this with students, that you'll really want them to ask to kind of tease apart a little bit is, well, which of these things do you think is here naturally? And which of these plants or animals do you think maybe humans brought here? So like dogs, for example, does that give us a hint about what biotic community it is, or that there's a human habitation there? So helping the kids kind of understand landscaped areas versus natural areas. Any thoughts about that, or any ways you all have done that in the past? Or maybe thinking about around your school, do you have places that you think you could bring the kids outside that they could see unlandscaped areas that are more natural?
The area around the center where I work out, the Rio Salado, is supposed to be a natural area, but it is a restored environment. We're trying to restore the area to what it looked like before the Granite Reef Dam was put in place over 100 years ago. So it kind of gives a picture of what this place used to look like, but it's still human-made, a human-made environment, even though everything here is a native plant.
Yeah, and it's possible to plant native plants too, right? So sometimes that can be confusing as well. Gloria, I saw you unmute yourself. Do you want to share kind of how you would think about bringing kids outside and doing this activity?
Yeah, actually, during my first week of the school year, I introduced science to them when I brought them outside the school building. So I told them, observe, write down everything that you see around, nearby, far from you. And the natural thing that they saw was the rock formation, the mountains, the grasses, dry and green, and the vast flatland.
That's great. Thank you so much. So you're already doing this. That's awesome, Gloria. Any other thoughts about sort of how you would bring your kids and what spaces you would use around your schools? Part of what we're trying to do today is really make sure that you feel like you could take this and use it easily in your own setting. So if you have other thoughts you want to share, and we'll do some breakout rooms here in a minute so you can discuss in smaller groups. Any other thoughts before we move on? Okay, great. I am going to go back to screen share then. And we're going to delve into those different biotic communities we were talking about earlier and talk about them with a little bit more detail. And so what I'm going to be running through with you all basically is a reflection of what the students would have done for their reading and what they would be presenting to one another. I'm going to run through it quickly so that just because we have limited time today. So where do we live? I think this is one of those really important things. And part of the reason I was really excited to work on this curriculum is I was a classroom teacher. I realized I didn't really give my own bio. But I was a classroom teacher for about 10 years. And one of the things I found frustrating was I never had really good grade level appropriate readings for our local environments. You know, maybe I could find something on ponderosa forests or on the Sonoran Desert, but there wasn't something that would help me discuss like pinyon juniper woodlands or interior chaparral. So that's part of the goal of this, is to help you all with some resources that would be useful to work with kids that are really relevant to where they live. So our biotic communities are really defined by what plant populations there are there, the temperature and precipitation, which are the climate, the soil and geology, and the elevation. And those are the things that really contribute to what we define as biotic communities. So this is kind of a simplified map of the biotic communities across the Southwest. The two that I mentioned earlier that are not included on here are alpine, which you would see in just a couple of spots up in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And then riparian areas, which would run along the river bottoms. But other than that, these are the primary biotic communities across the Southwest. And this, like I said, all of these materials are available for you all and are included in the downloadable and online materials that I'll share later. So starting at kind of the lowest elevations, desert scrub, and this is what we see in the Sonoran and Mojave deserts. Lots of cacti, yucca, agave. Elevation can be from 0 to about 6,000 feet. One of the big things is deserts get less than 10 inches of rain per year. So I hear Santa Fe defined as a high desert a lot, and that's actually incorrect. We get slightly too much rain here to be considered a desert. We're actually a steppe environment. Temperature ranges from below freezing to over 120 degrees. So there's a major range of temperature. And challenges in this region include invasive species, climate change, and human settlement and impacts. And all of these things are gone into with a lot more depth in the readings. I'm just kind of have a high-level summary here for you all. And as I'm going through these, I want you to be thinking about, okay, which of these can I see from where I am? And where am I located right now? And what evidence do I see that tells me that? So desert grasslands, these are areas that can be slightly higher than the deserts. You can still see that precipitation is between 0 and 10 inches. Once again, similar temperature range, below freezing to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Similar plants to deserts, but more grasses. So you're going to get more plants that are adapted to fire. And we'll get into that in the next section, but just as a little bit of a preview. There are some challenges in this area as well, which you're going to hear me repeat over and over again. Invasive plant species, climate change, and human settlement and impacts all impact the desert grasslands. We get up just a little bit higher and we get into the grasslands, and these are the prairies, especially the short grass prairies. You don't have a lot of this in Arizona, but in New Mexico, on the eastern side of New Mexico, there's a number of grasslands. So grasses, of course, you would expect to see, and these include blue grama, which is New Mexico's state grass, side oak grama, prickly pears and other cacti, a bunch of different wildflowers, and yucca are all common in these areas. Here you see a grassland with a cholla here in the middle, and a can't quite tell what kind of bird, some sort of bird sitting there. The elevation's a little bit higher than what we were talking about before, so between about 1,000 and 10,000 feet. Precipitation is a little bit more as well, between 12 and 24 inches, and tends to be a little bit cooler. So we're not seeing temperatures up into the 120s. Major issues in this area: invasive species, climate change, human settlement and impacts, and actually fire suppression is one of the major impacts in this region. And we'll talk about why that is later. Sagebrush shrublands. So these are really beautiful areas. They can feel a little bit desolate if you're not used to them, but there are a number of sagebrush shrublands, especially in the northern part of Arizona and New Mexico, kind of north eastern Arizona, and then splotches of them across northern New Mexico as well. Of course, the plant you would expect to see in a sagebrush shrubland and steppe is sagebrush. And there's a number of different varieties of sagebrush that are gone into more detail in the readings. Biological soils, which are living soils, which can be called cryptobiotic crusts too. So it's basically like a combination of moss and algae that dries up and creates this kind of brown crust on the soil. And then when it rains, it absorbs and grows, photosynthesizes, and then dries up again. It's a really cool plant. And if you have this around your school or somewhere that you can show kids, it's really fun to pour water on it, and you can see it turn green within about 2 minutes. So So that's a fun thing. So there's really sparse grasses in this area, or there should be sparse grasses that are spread far apart. Elevation 1,300 to about 10,000 feet. Low to moderate precipitation, and below freezing to in the 80s and sometimes 90s, depending on where you're located. Major challenges to this region include invasive species, climate change, human settlement, and then a lot of times these are built on shale and other fossil fuel rich soils. So oil and gas industry has had a major impact on sagebrush regions. Next, we get into the interior chaparral. A lot of times the coastal chaparral is discussed, but in Arizona, there's actually some large regions that have interior chaparral, especially in the area around like Prescott. And these are shrubby areas. A lot of times you'll see manzanita and other similar plants, shrub oaks, buckwheat, some different types of grasses, range in elevation from 2,500 to a little over 8,000 feet, precipitation 15 to 24 inches. So once again, a lot more than the deserts. Average temperature range just below freezing to up around 100. And major challenges in this area are climate change, which is heating and drying the region, and fire suppression, because this is one that was highly adapted to fire. And we'll talk about that fire piece in a few minutes. Oak woodlands. So these are found kind of in the southern part, especially of Arizona, in some of the higher elevations. If you've ever been down near Bisbee in that area, you'll see some oak woodlands. Another name for this is Madrian oak woodlands. And these stretch down into Mexico. So as you would expect, similar to the sagebrush shrublands, it's named after one of the plants that grows there. So you'd expect to see a lot of different oaks. There's also a smattering of pine and juniper, cacti and yucca, as you see in this picture. Tends to be at a little bit higher elevations, so 4,000 to 9,000 feet, a little bit more precipitation, 14 to 43 inches. And of course, like at the higher elevations, you may be getting a little bit more precipitation. They tend to be fairly warm woodlands. So these are temperate woodlands, 30 to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And challenges, once again, human settlement and habitation and climate change. And please stop me along the way if you want me to talk about any of these in more detail. Then I can point you towards some of the other resources that we have around them. Okay. Pinyon juniper woodlands. This is what I see when I look out my backyard. Of course, two of the primary plants you would expect to see there are pinyon and juniper, which is what I see right outside. There's two different varieties of pinyon pines. There's the single needle and then the two needle, which we have here in Santa Fe. The single needle you see more in Utah and northern Arizona. You can see that as well. Elevation ranges from about 45 to 7,500 feet. Precipitation 11 to 22 inches. Average temperatures range from right around freezing or right around 0 to about 100 degrees. So pretty major swings in temperature. Once again, challenges, climate change and human settlement are both major issues in this area. Oh, yay. Apple just, I see, says she loves pinyon junipers as well. She's here in Santa Fe with me. So the start of her license plate is PJC, stands for Pinyon Juniper Champion. I love it, Apple. Thanks for sharing. I know that a few of you are living in Ponderosa forests. I heard especially Annie talking about that. So you'll notice a lot of these are named after the types of plants that live there. So Ponderosa forests tend to have Ponderosa in them. which is, if you know the tree that's supposed to be, sometimes I hear it called the vanilla tree. If you go up and smell the bark, it smells like vanilla. Has this very distinctive kind of ridged look where the newer bark is darker and the older, oh, I need to stop clicking on my screen. The older bark is a little bit lighter, has bundles of 3 needles that are about that long. There's a number of different wildflowers that live in this area, manzanita, grasses. Elevation ranges from about 5 to 10,000 feet. Precipitation, about 10 to 21 inches. Temperature range is pretty major, from -40 to over 110 degrees. And challenges, once again, are climate change and fire suppression. Human habitation as well, but climate change and fire suppression are 2 of the big ones. Finally, we're up in the mountains. So you can kind of imagine we've driven all the way from like that southern part of Arizona up, and we're into the mixed conifer forests. So up here, you'll see a lot more pines and spruce and firs. Aspen is one of the big hints that you're in a mixed conifer forest. Maple trees. These are much higher elevations, so 6 to 12,000 feet. A lot more precipitation, usually between 10 and 95 inches. And then average temperature from below freezing to at the higher ends 100 degrees. And challenges include climate change and invasive species as being 2 of the big issues in this region. So we're going to get into breakout rooms for a couple minutes and have some time to work in small groups, because I think one of the really nice things about these meetings is that we can talk to our fellow teachers and really kind of brainstorm and think through how you would do this and how you would make it work in your classroom. So in your small group, I want you to share the data you collected outside and then compare this to what you learned about biotic communities just now. I want you to make a claim about which biotic community you're in, support your claim with evidence, and then share your thinking with your group. Any questions about that? I know that some of you all are having issues with being able to use your, sorry, trying to multitask and it never goes well. Some of you are having issues with using your microphones, so please use chat to share your thinking. I am going to put you into 2 different breakout rooms. Oh, somebody just dropped off. I'm going to move. There we go. So there's going to be 4 people in each breakout room. I'm going to send you to those rooms now. Let me drop instructions into chat so you have those. Any questions about what we're doing? Nope. Okay. So I'm going to send you to breakout rooms for 10 minutes. So at 10:35, I will bring you back in here. And if you get a chance and you're able to take off your videos and be able to have a conversation and do video and audio, that would be great. I think it just makes for a better conversation, but I also understand if you're feeling shy, you will not be recorded in the breakout rooms. So if that makes you feel better. I am going to send you in your rooms. If you have any questions, you can come back into the main room and grab me, and I'm happy to come visit you. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
How did your breakout rooms go?
It was good. Corey and I were in the same room, and Gloria too. So,
Oh, great.
and then Paul, whose mic wasn't working, so he wrote it into the chat.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I know. It's so frustrating with technology these days, like how to participate if things aren't functioning properly.
Yeah, for sure. We had issues yesterday on Zoom, so.
It's never ending.
Yeah.
Zoom issues.
It happens.
My mom works at the local university hospital, and I don't know if they forgot to pay their Zoom bill, but like all of Zoom for the entire hospital shut down.
Oh my goodness.
So that was not great. She was not happy.
Oh boy.
Okay, everyone, I think everyone's back at this point. Thank you so much. We'll have a couple more breakout groups that we do today. I think it's really important to be able to talk with other educators and kind of brainstorm and think about this and what works and what doesn't work in your own space and classroom. So let's just have a quick reflection. What did you all talk about in your different groups? So let's start with breakout group 1, which had Annie, Gloria, Paul, and Corey.
I talked about how I kind of straddling 2 different areas. So if you look out on my south side, you see more of a desert scrub. But if you look at my north side, you see a riparian zone. So I get to sit, and we didn't talk too much about the riparian and the slides, but I'm kind of straddling both those areas, even though overall the area is a desert scrub. I have the Salt River and then a pond here that provides the water to create the riparian zone.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, and I do think we should add riparian and what was the other one I mentioned? Alpine tundra to our curriculum. Other people, what did you all notice for breakout room 1? And it could also be strategies or thoughts you have about how you're going to do this with students.
Hi, this is Gloria. I just shared them the biotic community that I thought of here at Newcomb. Newcomb is actually dry place, and I assume that this is desert grassland biotic community. Why? Because we can see this sandy soil, grasses only, very few trees. If there are trees, they are just along where the creeks are, no source of water. But before this had, there was water running, but I just don't know why. So, and I told them, it's just like we are at the middle of nowhere. It's between Gallup and Farmington.
It's a beautiful area though.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah, it's
Gloria.
elevation. The elevation here is about 5,554 feet. So it's kind of dry, cold. Now it's becoming cold this time, but it is warm during the day.
Yeah, it's one of the amazing things about our region is the temperature swings that we have even in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share from group 1?
I kind of said earlier, but I'm in Flagstaff and we're a ponderosa forest here. And I can see that because I see lots of ponderosa everywhere. And we have some of the mixed conifer, but that's a bit higher than where I live. But like if you go up into the peaks, we have the aspens and all the mixed conifer trees, spruce trees and everything. So yeah, and Paul wasn't able to get his mic to work, but he is in the Phoenix area, I think pretty near to where Corey is. So it sounds as if it's a pretty similar ecosystem down there.
That's awesome. And one of the things I love about doing these trainings online is that we have people from all of these different biotic communities who can talk about where they're from. And I'd encourage you, if you find another teacher or educator that's on here that you'd like to exchange contact information with. You could even do like a little exchange program with your students where they write to each other about their biotic communities. So that could be like a fun little extension for this. Okay, let's go to breakout room 2. What do you all want to share?
I was talking about, since Albuquerque itself is in like sort of a transitional environment where there's a lot of different, it's like a lot of blend between higher up in the mountains. I forget the name, but it's like the larger trees and more wet. And then as you come down, it's kind of a mixture of more like sagebrush, kind of moving into grassland-ish, but then also more into the desert and things like that.
Yeah, it's one of the cool things about changing elevations. You get a lot of different biotic communities that you can see from just looking right outside. Anyone else from breakout room 2?
Sure, and I don't think, unfortunately, that Jeannie and Carmen can lend their voices. But if you have anything you want to add to the chat, Jeannie and Carmen, please go ahead. And we talked about it, the three of us, more so where we live, not necessarily where everyone teaches, is Pinyon Juniper, sounds like.
I see Jeannie is agreeing there. That's great. Cool. Well, thank you all so much. Is there anything else, any questions anyone has about the biotic communities? Like I said earlier, there are sort of in-depth readings, and let me just show you what those look like really quickly.
Thanks, Molly. Because I was mentioning to our group how a lot that's in the curriculum with the readings and the images can be a bridge between that outdoor observation activity and discussing what biotic community you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just an example of the deserts. And like I said, animals are getting added in. We literally just finished editing those this week. And so if you can hold off for like a week to start this unit, there'll be animals added in here, but it'll have information about the climate, plants. This one, the deserts, is probably the longest one because there's 3 different major deserts that all need to be kind of described separately. There's images in there, a little bit about some of the animals, human populations, including cities and tribal lands. There's a climate activity where students are given temperature and precipitation data and asked to graph it. And then there's information on different specific plants that grow in the desert, so each kid can become an expert in a different plant. And then this pairs with some data collection pages that help guide the students' note-taking. I can open this. So for instance, this is the plant data collection page where they name the plant, Latin name, how big it is, adaptations, etc., where it's found. And then they would add all of this to the mural. So that's kind of what this piece looks like. Any questions about any of the materials here? The other thing just to make note of, things are taking a long time to open today. So in the lesson plan at the end of lesson 1 also has a chart that shows the elevation comparatively of all of the different biotic communities. So this is something else you can use. Questions?
I was just wondering if some of these lessons could be like standalone if you only have time to do, like for me, I only come do it to schools maybe once, maybe twice for my specific programs. So I was wondering if some of these could be just condensed and like you could just talk about one aspect of the program.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we kind of designed it to have those three major themes that are discussed because we know that some teachers already discuss biotic communities or ecosystems, and they don't really need additional information on that, but maybe they really want to get into fire. And then some of the, any of the lessons could just be used as a standalone lesson, with the exception of lesson number 7 would be really hard to do because that gets into having the kids try to figure out what fire regime they're a part of and their biotic community is. And to do that, they really need to have done the readings. Does that answer your question, Jennifer?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Other questions? Okay. Let's keep moving on then. And please interrupt me along the way if you have things you want to know more about or want me to go into more detail. We're going through 10 lessons today, so I'm trying to be, we'll get into a couple of them in more depth, but a lot of them we're just going to kind of fly through. Okay, so we did our little breakout session here. And then we move into lesson 3, which is when we first really start thinking about fire. So my question for you all is, what is fire? And I'd like you to drop your answers into chat. So what is fire? So answers are starting to come in. We have energy, a chemical reaction, a reaction. Any other thoughts? Combustion. Okay. Yeah, I think fire is one of those really interesting phenomena that we know it when we see it, but I think sometimes defining it, especially with kids, it's challenging for them. So let's get into just a little bit of what fire really is. And then comparing fire to decomposition and cellular respiration. So fire is the visible process of combustion. And to have a fire, you need the fire triangle. So you need oxygen, you need a heat source, and you need a fuel that you're burning. This is kind of a cool thing to do if you've ever done this. This is a candle, looking at it from the top, but then lowering some mesh over it. So you can see fire is really only happening in this ring on the outside, where the fuel, which is the wax that has turned into a vapor, is meeting oxygen. And so only the exterior piece of the flame is actually burning. The center isn't on fire, which is really cool. So when we have a fire, what we're really seeing is the visual conversion of carbon or of fuel and an oxygen source into carbon dioxide and water. And the flame that we see is just one part of the fire as the gases are being vaporized and ignited, but there's other parts of the fire that are more invisible. And then something else that really gets emphasized in this is there's the same process in fire as in decomposition and cellular respiration. And there's an activity that the kids will get led through that helps them understand that. So just a quick reminder of what happens during a fire is you have your fuel source. So in this case, it's benzene. And there's always the carbon bonds that get broken apart and release energy. And that energy that we feel in heat and see in light is that release of energy. So plus oxygen, you add a heat source, so you break those bonds apart. And then you're left with carbon dioxide and water. And I think thinking about water as a byproduct of fire blows a lot of kids' minds. It's kind of a cool thing to think about with them. So let me pull up the interactive notebook just so you can see. So this is one of the resources that we have available for you, which is an interactive notebook that's in Google Slides that students can use if you are moving back and forth between remote and in-person environments. So there's a reading for them to do. And then there are these molecules. So we have a glucose molecule, which is a sugar molecule, which would be stored in grass or in another food source. We have 6 oxygen molecules. In this one, it's cellular respiration. So this cow eats it. And then you move the pieces across and rebuild them into carbon dioxide and water molecules. So that's what happens in cellular respiration. Decomposition, it's the same process. It just happens much more slowly. And then finally, fire is also the same process. And like I said, these can all be moved over. So the kids can build those molecules. And then once they've gone through that, each of the kids becomes an expert in each one of those different processes. They share it with each other. They discuss how the sun produces solar energy that's stored in the grass in the form of glucose. And then they take some notes on what molecules you started with, what happened to the molecules, what happened to the energy, and how long it took. So for instance, in cellular respiration, the energy that was released, fueled that animal. Versus in fire, it was released as heat and light. And then there's a homework assignment that goes with it. And then you jump into the next unit. So let me go back here. So these can also be printed as handouts, and there's like little molecules that the kids can cut apart and move around as well. So that can happen in that way. Okay, so I wanted to pause here again because we've been going for another hour, and I promise that we'll stop at least once an hour because otherwise it can feel like too much. So any questions about that first kind of unit where we get into biotic communities and then what fire is and how it compares to decomposition and cellular respiration? Anybody's got any questions? It's a good time for it, or you can ask after the break too. Oh, that's great, Jeannie. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is the first one I've built, so let me know if there's issues with it. But do try it. I think the pages I'd recommend printing are the graphing pages. The kids can get those to work, but it's pretty fiddly and kind of annoying to do. So I would print those pages, but the rest of it can be done online pretty easily. Other thoughts? Issues? The question I always then would finish this little bit where they're thinking about the similarity between decomposition, fire, and animals consuming those materials is how does that relate to fire and wildland fire? So I'd like you to think about that on your break. Is why is the process of breaking down carbon an important thing to understand when you're thinking about wildland fire? What happens if it doesn't get broken down? So we'll return to that thought when we get back and when we start talking about fuel properties. So if I can have everybody back here, could you use some time? Would 13 minutes be good? It gives you time to go walk around, stretch. Good? Excellent. Okay. Thanks, Jeannie. I will see you here at 11:10, or for those of you that are in Arizona, 10:10. Welcome back, everyone. So we started off with understanding our biotic communities, and now we're really going to delve into fire. So this is, if I were doing this the traditional way with kids, this is where I would insert a lesson on fire safety and how to use a fire extinguisher, and talking with them about fire trauma, threatening them that they should never set anything on fire ever without adult supervision, et cetera, et cetera. There's also some activities that you can do where you can do a survey around your school, or have the kids do surveys around their homes if you primarily work with kids who live in single family or homes that are owned, looking at fire safety issues around like encroachment of plants in the yard and that sort of thing. So there's a bunch of different activities there in 4A. Then we get into 4B, which I think is the most fun of all of the lessons. And this may be the one that you'll want to have somebody from a local fire agency come into your house. But before we do that, I realized that I did not have Annie or Corey really introduce themselves. So I'm going to put Annie on the spot to just tell you a little bit about the Fire Science Consortium. And then I'll let Corey introduce himself as well.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Annie. So I'm working with the Southwest Fire Science Consortium. It's located in Flagstaff at NAU, but we encompass the whole Southwest region. So that's all of Arizona, all of New Mexico, a little piece of West Texas, and a little piece of southwestern Colorado. And the goal of the consortium is we're federally funded, and we are trying to get emerging fire science to fire managers and those that work on fires, as well as the community. So we're just kind of a way connecting the scientists with the people that actually fight fires, and doing outreach education like this. So Molly has created this curriculum, and we're really excited about it. And yeah, so that's great. Do you guys have questions about the Southwest Fire Science Consortium or anything? I can answer those.
Could you do a little about the videos that you guys have on your website as well? Because I think those could be really helpful.
Okay. Yeah, so if you check out our website, which is where I believe it's the only place to download the curriculum. So it's where you'll be downloading the curriculum. There's a tab that says, I think it says publications or something at the top, and then it has videos in there. And so there's different types of videos that go into different categories, but it's anything from webinars in which people who have written recent scientific papers explain their research and their findings. So you can watch those. So if there's a subject that you find interesting, that's a good way to learn more about it. And then we also have success stories and lessons learned videos. I really like the, yes, Apple put on the chat, this World of Wildland Fire videos. So Andy Thode, who is the PI, so that means she's the one that runs the consortium. She has helped put these together, and they're really good. They give the basics of wildland fire, wildfire. And so it's a really good starting place to learn more about fire. And they're pretty short and really like very ingestible, so like easy to understand. So I would definitely suggest starting with those. Is that what you're hoping for?
That was awesome. Sorry, I realized when you joined I had not like introduced you or done a good job
Oh,
with that.
I was late. It's okay.
And then Corey, who evidently just had to step away to deal with a leaking fish tank because he is at work right now. He works at the Audubon Center that's in Phoenix, which is an amazing place to go visit or do field trips if you live anywhere close to there. Okay. If you all are ready, then let's jump into fire. So the next thing we're going to do is a fuel properties activity. So this is lesson 4. And this activity, you are going to set stuff on fire. There is a video version of it that if you're really nervous about doing that, or if you're in a remote environment, that you could do it online and have the kids just watch a video. But it really is an amazing hook, and it really gets a lot of buy-in from the kids to do a real burn. So this activity is designed to help kids try to figure out what are the fuel properties. And so like a good 5E approach to learning, it doesn't start off with giving them the names of the fuel properties. It starts by having them make observations and then matching those observations with the names. So as we discussed earlier, all fires require fuel. And the fuels that are present will determine how a fire behaves. And that could be in your fireplace, or it could be on the landscape. So if you picture, if you're just burning newspaper in your fireplace at home, it's going to be a really different kind of fire than if you're burning wood. So each of the different biotic communities has different types of fuels and different ways that those fuels accumulate. So we're going to learn a little bit more about fuels now. So in the lesson plan, there's really detailed instructions on how to create 3 different models for burning that really illustrate the different ways that fuels burn in the natural environment. So that could include green fuels, which are wet, comparing them to dry fuels, fine fuels compared to larger fuels, so like sticks compared to pine needles, places where fire can continue versus places where it'll stop if there's a lack of fuel. So we're going to watch a little video of a burning experiment that was pre-recorded. And each of these pans that I showed on the last one, each of these was recorded burning. So we do have that option for you. Once again, if there's any way that you can get permission from your principal to do this as a live experiment, I think it's a much more powerful experience for the kids. So I want you to put a prediction in chat. These are the same pan from the top and from the side. The fire is going to be started here with a match and here with a match. You can see that there's different types of fuels. And I want you just to make a quick prediction of what you think is going to happen when we set this on fire. And for the kids, what I would do is I would have these 3 pans set up on tables when they came in, have the fuels already arranged, and then have them walk around all the pans and make observations about what they notice. Have maybe like a Post-it spot where you're going to show where the fire is going to start. So go ahead, drop in chat what you think is going to happen when we set this on fire. So we have predictions about the direction it's going to burn, about what's going to burn first, what's going to burn more quickly. So if you don't put it in chat, just jot down your answer really quickly. And then we're going to go ahead and watch the fire. So I'm going to assume that everybody has had a chance to do that at this point. So I'm going to open this up in YouTube just so we can fill up the whole screen. And let's pray. Let's watch. Oh, and I paused it instead of starting it. Excellent. Is everybody able to see? So as you watch, take notes on what you see happening. Oh, my husband just got online in the other room, which messes up our internet. So sorry about that.
Do you own your home
Whoa.
in New Mexico, but still rent your electricity? If you pay more than
Sorry about that. Let's close that guy down. So we watched this video of the burning. Let me just go back and remind you guys what it started looking like. So the next thing that we're going to do, yes, that was juniper in the middle. Absolutely. So you can see there's pine needles, there's grasses, there's juniper here, there's dried juniper there. There's wet grasses and pine needles and dry grasses and pine needles. Yeah. Yeah, it makes you realize as you're looking at things burning and how long they burn. Anyway, we're gonna go into all that here in just a moment. So, sorry, originally I'd had my Jamboards work in a slightly different way. Let me escape here. So we're going to have room 1 is going to be in this Jamboard. And I'm just going to show you what's on the Jamboards because the next thing we're going to do is another breakout session where you're really going to delve into what it is that you noticed. So I'd like you to discuss what you noticed about how the fire burned and use sticky notes. So it's this little icon on the left that looks like a little sticky note. You can choose what color you want it to be. Then you can write, I noticed, and then whatever you saw, then you save it and it'll show up on your page here. So I want you to spend about 5 minutes having everybody share what they noticed. And then I want you to go on to the next page. Next, you're going to learn about wildland fire properties. All wildland fire behavior is dependent on certain fuel characteristics. And so then you're going to try to identify when you did or didn't see different wildland fire properties. So you won't have seen all of these, but all of these, if you burned all the pans, you would see these different things. So when did you see fuel size and shape make a difference? When did you see fuel continuity? So this is where they're taking what they noticed and they're giving vocabulary that then matches with it. And then the final page is, what do you still wonder about how fuel properties relate to wildland fires? How could you learn more? Add your comments below. And then this would be the framework that you would use to help the kids make their own decisions about what they want to do as their own experiment in lesson 6. So what do you still wonder? What do you still want to know more about? So we're going to spend about 15 minutes in our breakout rooms now. I am going to drop in the Jamboards for rooms 1 and 2. Ignore the grade levels. Originally, I thought I was going to have enough people that we could do breakout rooms by grade level, but that did not happen, which is fine. Is everybody comfortable using Jamboards? If there's any issues with the Jamboards, please let me know, and I can help troubleshoot that for you. So I'm going to put you back into your 2 rooms. And any questions on what our activity is? Great. So we're going to be in our jam rooms for about 15 minutes, and then I'll call you back into the main room. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you all so much for participating in those breakout rooms. It's really meant to be a chance to kind of talk over how that's working with you and your kids and how you think you'd apply it. So let me just show you what this looks like in the interactive notebook. You'll notice there's a few more because this will be after they had watched all 3 models burn. So here's all of the different wildland fuel properties. They can move them around, discuss, think about when they saw each one, make notes about it. That's kind of the goal here. And then for homework, they would take a look at each of those different types of fuel properties. So fuel location, fuel load, fuel size and shape. The compactness, so how tightly the different fuels are compacted, how the fuels are arranged, how moist they are, if they're continuous or if there's breaks in them and how that impacts the burning. So this is one of those lessons that I'd love to just kind of hear from you all. How many of you would feel comfortable doing a burning experiment in your own classroom? I mean, outside, you wouldn't want to, unless you've got a flame hood, you wouldn't want to do this inside. but how many of you would feel comfortable doing this yourself?
For me,
Outside, yes.
outside. Outside, using clay rather than aluminum.
Yeah, depending on what materials you have, absolutely. Great, so it sounds like most people feel pretty comfortable with this. This is one lesson where I'm working with the Forest Service. Oh, how structured the pans are. Thanks so much, Jeannie. Yeah, there was a lot of thought that went into those so that it could really demonstrate the different ways that the fuel properties react to fire. And that's really one of the goals, is to structure things so the kids can discover it themselves, but that it's structured in a way that leads to those discoveries instead of just like random observations, which are never bad. Random observations can be good too, but there's method behind the madness here. Yeah, so that's great. So one of the things we're working on with Apple and some of the other land and fire managers around New Mexico and Arizona is preparing them to actually come into your classrooms too. So you could have a fire scientist or a wildland fire manager or a firefighter come in and visit your classroom and do this experiment with the kids. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you contact me and I can set you up with some people to talk to about that. Don't tell me right now, but at the end, we'll get a list. Questions about how this experiment would go? Great, thanks. Yeah, this was from the teachers that have piloted this so far. This has by far been their favorite, the kids' favorite activity. Burning stuff. Yeah, and tying it into a field trip. And I don't think that any of the teachers from Mora made it today, but if you live anywhere near a fire scar, you could do this and then you could go visit that area. Or even if it's not near a fire scar, you could go and do an assessment of what kind of fuels are available. Where do you see them? Where are they collecting? What would happen if this set on fire? Thinking back to what we noticed in the experiment, what would happen if there was a lightning strike here? Is the fuel continuous? Can it climb? Would it become a ground fire or would it become a fire that's happening up in the canopy of the trees? So really having them think about those things and apply it to a real world situation would be awesome. And I know that's not possible everywhere, but a lot of you live in places where you can really get outside. So, and even in places like Phoenix, we have locations like Corey's, the Audubon Center there. So it would be a possible place for bringing kids on a field trip to a nature center or somewhere similar. Good thinking, Jeannie. Thank you for sharing. Other thoughts before we move on? Okay, so let's jump into thinking about, oh, sorry, here. Let me jump back to our PowerPoint. So we've gotten through lesson 4 here. In lesson 5, the students actually take what they've learned about fuels, they take what they've learned about biotic communities, and they combine that with fire. So there's readings about how their biotic communities interact with fire and how their plants are adapted or not to fire and how their animals either depend on or are negatively impacted by fire. So that's lesson 5. Lesson 6 really has them take what they're thinking about and wondering about, both with their biotic communities and then also their plants they've researched, maybe the animals they've researched, and they get to really design their own fire experiment. This is one where if you've got a super wild class, maybe this is a lesson you skip, but, or you do it as a whole class where you design an experiment. But this is a chance for them to think about what question are they trying to answer? What variable do they want to test? So isolating a single variable, I think that's sometimes tough. Kids are like, I want to know like the following 8 things and I want to do all that in one experiment. And that's just not possible. So having them identify a specific variable and testing that. You wouldn't necessarily have to use fire in this one. You could look at heat transfer. What are good insulators? You could look at different types of tree bark is one of the examples we give. Like if you have thin tree bark versus thick tree bark, how would that impact the ability of the tree to survive? The students need to come up with a materials list, a hypothesis, their procedure, results, a reflection, and then how does, like, what does this tell them about that bigger picture questions that they're trying to answer? So that's lesson 6. Lesson 7 is really delving into one of the central topics that was one of the goals of writing this curriculum, which is having the kids understand that different biotic communities are differently adapted to fire. So really having them understand what are the fire regimes of these different biotic communities. And we're going to delve into that next. So they would take what they've learned, all the readings they've done, and then they'd take a look at what are the dominant types of plants, how has this changed, and it walks them through a series of questions that then allow them to understand the local fire regime. And I'm going to skip that break because we just took a break. And I'd like to see if we could, instead of, let's see, let me look at my calendar here. 7, yeah, let's see if we can get through fire regime. Well, let me ask you all, would you rather power through for like another 20 minutes and do a short break and then finish early today? Or would you rather do a longer lunch break and finish at 1:30? And I'll let you vote. So if you want to put in chat if you'd rather end early and have fewer breaks, or a little bit more break. So vote for end early, fewer breaks. Seems like there's consensus. Great. Okay, so we're going to power through. If you need to get up and use the restroom or anything, please do so. I trust you all to make decisions that are right for you. Cool. Let's keep going then. Come on. So let's delve into fire regimes. So what is a fire regime? This is basically the way that scientists classify the type and frequency of fire that you see in different landscapes. So for example, what type of vegetation do you have? What sort of climate do you have? Is it really wet? Is it dry? Is it hot? Is it cold? When is your dry season and when is your wet season? How often does fire return to your landscape? How intense is the fire? And intensity, we'll go into each of these subtopics. So basically, how hot is the fire? How destructive is the fire, is the severity? And then what type of fire is it? So we're going to get into each of these different subtopics. So the first is vegetation. So think about everything that we've learned about vegetation from the biotic communities, and then apply that to thinking about what type of fire that type of vegetation we would allow for. So trees have a lot more carbon stored in them, so there's going to be a greater ability for that fire to be hotter versus a grass. Think about if you burn grass, it burns quickly, it burns fast, and it burns at a fairly low temperature. Succulents are going to have a very different reaction to fire than a tree or a shrub or a grass. And then also if they're perennial versus annual plants. So if it's a perennial plant, that's something that returns year after year versus an annual plant, which dies after the first year and will create a dry dead fuel. Second question, what type of climate is it? So climate is based on the combination of temperature and precipitation. And the temperature can either be classified as a hot temperature or a cold temperature. And this is Köppen's climate types. So which is the primary way that climate is sort of defined. I think this is a really interesting map to look at because if you look at our region here, how many different climate types there are compared to like the South or New England. And these really match up with our mountain ranges. So we have a lot more climate type here than they do in many other parts of the world. Then precipitation is broken into dry or arid, which tends to be less than 10 inches of rain, semi-arid, which is kind of that 10 to 20 inches, moist, and then wet. And wet would be places that are like rainforests. So we don't really have that here, but we do have moist areas. Seasonality. When is it that you get your rain in your region? And that's part of the reason that we have those graphs and charts of for the kids to do where they look at when does rain happen, when is it hot, when is it cold, so that then they have the data that they need to be able to plug in and see, oh, there's almost no rain that happens in the spring. Man, I bet it's really dry then. It's really windy then. Okay, that makes sense that then that would be when the fire season is. The next thing to think about is fire frequency. In the past, how often has it burned? And there's information about that in the readings. So high frequency is every 0 to 35 years, moderate is 36 to 200, and low is greater than 200 years. And you can imagine the plants are going to be really different. If you're in a high frequency area, those plants are going to be well adapted to burning versus low frequency, those plants are going to be poorly adapted to burning. Fire intensity. So this is the temperature of the burn. So a low intensity fire is going to burn smaller fuels, lighter fuels, less carbon dense fuels. Moderate intensity is going to have fuels that are a little bit heavier. And high intensity fires are going to burn, wood and things that are going to burn at a high temperature. Next is severity. And this has a kind of a combination of the intensity that we just discussed, plus how well adapted are the plants in your area to fire? Are they able to survive a fire? So if we look at this picture here, it's burning along the ground. And even though there's trees here, the trees aren't burning because there's an ability of the fire to travel along the ground, burn those fine fuels, move quickly, and not travel up into the canopy. So that would be a low severity. A moderate severity would be something that's killing between 30 and 80% of the vegetation and exposing a lot of the soils. And a high severity fire is killing more than 80% of the overstory. So it's killing more than 80% of the plants in that area. Where is the fire burning? So a ground fire burns the organic material that's actually inside the soil. A surface fire burns right along the surface. So similar to that last picture that we saw, this is a surface fire. It's burning right along the surface of the ground, happens quickly. And then a crown fire is where it's burning up into the tops of the shrubs and trees. So then using all this, there's 5 different categories of fire regimes. So fire regime group 1 has a high frequency. It returns every 0 to 35 years, oftentimes every 3 to 4 years. The severity is low or mixed. Oftentimes about 25% of the plant cover is burned. It can be as high as 75%, but tends to be a little bit lower. This is usually a surface fire, And in this type of fire, many of the plants will recover quickly and the biotic community remains fairly stable. Group 2, this type of fire returns once again frequently, so every 0 to 35 years. However, it's a high severity, so it's killing more than 75% of the plants. It's likely to be both surface and crown. So if this is happening in forests or woodlands, it's going to really prevent things from getting large. And it's likely to result in dramatic changes to the biotic community and damage to the soil. This will allow the community to recover, but it can take time. Group 3, fires return every 35 to 200 years, so much less frequent than groups 1 and 2. The severity is low or mixed. So once again, often less than 25% of the plants are killed. Often a combination of surface with some crown fire mixed in. And so small trees and shrubs burn, but enough plants survive that regeneration happens. And this biotic community is likely to bounce back within a few years. Group 4, fires return every 35 to 200 years. There's a high replacement of plants, so more than 75% of the plants are killed. This is likely to be both a surface and crown fire, so it's going to burn what's on the ground and it's going to kill what's higher up. It's likely to result in a dramatic change to the biotic community. It's likely to damage the soil, and it's likely for the community to take a long time to recover. The final type is group 5. This is a type of fire that happens very rarely, every 200 plus years. It tends to be a replacement style of fire. So this is what happens, and we'll go into how these impact the different biotic communities and what types of fire they're used to. It'll kill more than 20 or more than 75% of the plants. It's likely to be both surface and crown, so it's going to really destroy the majority of the plants that are in an area. And it's likely to result in dramatic changes to the biotic communities, damage to the soil, and will take a long time to recover from. So how are these fire regimes used by scientists? This is really when we get into that intersection between wildland fire and fire management, because depending on the types of fire regimes that different landscapes are used to, the fire managers are going to choose different techniques of doing fire suppression or controlled burns. So questions that scientists will ask themselves, or land managers will ask themselves, is how often did this area burn historically? Is the current fire regime the same as the historical one? How severe will the next fire be? Will a fire threaten people or endangered species? Do we need to thin the forest here? And when should we do that activity? When is the right season? So by better understanding the history of fire in a region and the fire regimes, scientists can make better decisions about the future. So this is where you'd break for the students to then take a look at their own research and try to figure out what the fire regimes are of their different communities. And so they'd go back and look at the biotic community pages, the plant info pages, the fire pages, and the plant fire pages. But we're not going to make you do that. I'll just tell you. And all of these, all the slideshow pieces that are built for the kids to look at, all of those are provided as downloadable. So you have access to all of this. So desert scrub, let's go back to those biotic communities and think about how they've changed or how they're the same. So historically, deserts were groups 3, 4, or 5. They didn't burn very often. Some of them really never burned. They burned, every 1,000 years or something like that. And one of the reasons for this is in desert scrub, there was historically not enough fuel to carry fire across the landscape. This has really changed as invasive species have brought in. And I bet that Corey can look out his window and see some grasses, especially some of the grasses that have been brought in from Central Asia, North Africa. Those have really created a fuel source that can then, and Corey, I don't know, do you see those in your region?
Yes, we're actually having a work day today, removing some of the species. So like stinknet or globe chamomile, buffalo grass. Then we have there's red and purple fountain grass. Those ones people actually plant in the yard as an ornamental. I don't believe you can buy the red fountain grass anymore, but you can still buy purple. They say purple doesn't spread, but it just spreads at a much slower rate.
Yeah, so a lot of these plants have been brought in as decorative plants that we plant in our yards or as food for animals. And once they escape from our yards, they end up spreading and really changing the biotic communities around us. So currently deserts are being converted into group 1 or 2. And one of the impacts of this is a lot of plants that live in these areas, such as saguaro cacti or a lot of the succulent plants, are not adapted to fire. And if a fire burns around them, even if it's a low burning, low temperature fire, it'll still kill them, which is a kind of sad fact. So desert scrub is one that's definitely being converted as invasive species move through. Desert grasslands. So desert grasslands were historically a group 1. So quick burning, relatively regular burns. However, after years of fire suppression, as people moved into these areas and had cattle and other animals that they were grazing there, they prevented fires from burning across the landscape, and that allowed for shrubs and other plants that carry a lot more carbon bonds than burn at a higher temperature. So desert grasslands are converting into group 3 or 4. So burning less frequently, however, at a higher temperature. Same thing with grasslands. Grasslands were historically group 1. However, after years of fire suppression, an increase in invasive species, especially shrubs and trees moving into these areas, overgrazing, loss of native grasses, this has changed in some areas, not everywhere. So it really kind of depends on how your region has been impacted. I like your kitty there, Annie. No, it makes me happy. So grasslands are currently, some of them remain in group 1, but others are being converted into group 2 if they have more shrubs there, or group 3 if fire frequency is being reduced. Sagebrush shrublands are really not adapted to fire. Similar to deserts, sagebrush shrublands have this kind of spotty fuel historically that fire did not travel very far. It would, if lightning struck in that area or if something was set on fire, it would burn a small patchy area and then kind of burn out. But cheatgrass has been a major impact in this area. And cheatgrass is an annual grass that puts on quick growth, dies back, and then creates a fuel source that's able to carry fire farther across the landscape. Sagebrush is not well adapted to fire. And so if areas were once group 3, they burned at a low temperature infrequently, they're being converted into a group 1 category. Interior chaparral. This is the area that you would see like out near Prescott, lots of shrubby kind of dense growth. This has been historically a group 4, so it burns frequently, or it burns semi-frequently, and it burns, so it really destroys what's there and then grows back slowly over time. This has not really changed all that much. One of the really big challenges is if you don't let this type of landscape burn frequently, the fire or the fuel that builds up there can become really dangerous. So allowing chaparral to burn is important in maintaining it and maintaining a safe area. Oak woodlands are another area that surprisingly burned really frequently. Oak is well adapted to fire. However, there's been about a century of fire suppression in these regions, and this has caused an increase in invasive species or other species that are from the region but just were choked out by fire historically. So oak woodlands are being currently classified as more of a group 3 or group 4. So returning these to a regular fire pattern would be beneficial to a lot of our oak woodlands. Pinyon juniper historically was a group 3 and really continues to be a group 3. There tends to be a little bit more time between fires. And one of the things that's happened is pinyon juniper woodlands have crept down slope into former grasslands. So areas that used to be grasslands, which were group 1, have been converted into pinyon juniper woodlands as they haven't been burned. Ponderosa forests are probably one of the most famous fire adapted landscapes. And what's really interesting about ponderosa forests, if they burn frequently, if they burn, every few years, it prevents them from becoming overgrown. So a lot of these small trees that you see sprouting up, those would be killed by a low burning fire. The big trees would survive. And ponderosa have some really cool adaptations, such as they drop their lower branches. They've got a really thick plated bark that protects them from low temperature fires. But if you have fire suppression, what ends up happening is you have a lot more density of trees. And then these small trees actually act as a ladder. So it's called a ladder fuel, where fire is able to burn the small tree and then it's able to jump into the lower branches of the ponderosa pines. So fires that used to happen regularly have not happened. There's been a lot of fire suppression in ponderosa forests. And many of these ponderosa forests are some of the catastrophic burns that we're seeing across the West these days. So it's being converted from a group 1 to a group 4. Finally, mixed conifer forests. These were historically a group 3, where you would see these kind of patchy burns that would happen across a little region. Because they were moist forests, they wouldn't travel too far. However, as the region continues to dry and warm, a lot of the fires are happening at a 4 or a 5. So this is these more catastrophic fires burning more than 75% of the plants that are in an area. As you heard me mention numerous times, invasive species are having a major impact on the fuel loads of these different biotic communities. And they're also growing in soil that used to be bare. So they're both increasing the fuel and they're creating continuity. So that was one of those things that was those terms that was in our fire or our fuel terminologies that we were learning. So if you have an area that used to have big bare patches, you can imagine, okay, lightning strikes over here, but there's nothing to carry that fuel across that open ground. If you have cheatgrass, which is what this is a picture of, or some of the other grasses that Corey was discussing, that allows that fire to move over a larger distance and can have much more catastrophic impacts. So here's a map of our fire regimes. You can see, once again, across the West, it's very complex. So fire regimes change depending on what kind of fuel is available. Climate change is also supposed to have a major impact on fire regimes in the Southwest. So if you picture temperatures increasing an average of about 5.5 degrees over the next 50 years, that'll cause a decrease in snowpack, a drying of a lot of our forests, decreases in the levels of rivers and streams. There could be potentially increases in periods of drought, which would then in turn cause increases in the frequency and severity of fires in areas that in the past maybe rarely burned, especially our forests. And then if we don't have adequate rainfall, there will be a slow recovery after burns. And there's a concern that some of our forests and other areas that take a long time to recover may not recover. They may not turn back into a forest. Instead of becoming a forest, maybe they'll become a shrubland or an interior chaparral-like environment. Okay, so that was a lot that I just threw at you. Any questions about fire regimes? This is one of those really important concepts where earlier as I was getting questions, I don't remember who asked me this. I think maybe Jennifer was asking like which lessons would be really hard to teach in as just like a standalone lesson. Basically all the lessons between 1 and 6 built up to this one. So this would be a tough one to do on its own. Questions about fire regimes? And you're welcome to drop questions in chat too, if you want to not take yourself off mute. Give you all a second. No questions? Okay. So let's jump into lesson 8 then. So lesson 8 is really starting to understand that relationship then between how humans manage land and how that maybe has changed over time. So I think a lot of times this topic starts being addressed in sort of the early 20th century. Here we actually go back earlier and we look at the way that Pueblo people managed fire to clear underbrush and to create ways that food could be produced on our landscape historically. So they start by looking at historical tree ring, or they start by looking at tree rings, talking about what they can learn from tree rings, discuss what they can, how to read a tree ring, looking at some tree cookies that are from the US Forest Service. So when years happen where there was fires and how that leaves fire scars. And then looking at real data, there's a scientist who is collecting tree ring data from an area near Jemez, which is a historical pueblo here in New Mexico. And he mapped out tree ring frequency. So we have data sets for each student to get a different set of tree ring data. And then for them to calculate how many fires this tree saw during the time that where this pueblo was active. And then the different sites where tree rings were collected were different distances from the pueblo. So there's a trend that the closer to the pueblo that the tree was, the more frequently it burned with these low temperature, low burning fires, which helped clear out that underbrush. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. The scientist was willing to partner with us and share his data with us, which I was very, very appreciative of. So his information is in here. And actually, I believe that there's a video. His name is Chris Roos, I think. And I believe there's a video of his that's also in that link that Apple shared earlier as well. Then there's a review about how attitudes about fire have changed over time from sort of pre-colonial, early US fire management, and then modern fire management, and how perspectives and science has changed over time, and how current scientists are really learning from the early people who lived here before colonial occupation and how that's changed over time. Lesson 9 gets into a city council debate. So each student is assigned a different character. There's city councilors, there's the mayor, and then there's different people from the community who come and testify at the city council meeting. Each of them has a different perspective and will say, you know, how they think that fire should be managed in their region. And then at the end, the city councilors and the mayors need to decide if they'll move forward with the controlled burn and when should the controlled burn happen. And so this is a chance for kids to think about how there's a lot of different opinions about fire. And there's a lot of fear and issues that need to be resolved in the community, aside from just thinking about the science. Lesson 10, students then take what they've learned and send a letter to their local fire managers. So these are two that were written last year from down in Las Cruces with ideas about how they think fire should be managed in their region. So this individual was worried about dry fuel loads of dry grass and dead bushes, and has ideas about what to do there. This student thinks that they should mass produce fire extinguishers and then make the powder into a heavy liquid that could then be used from planes. So they're really thinking creatively about what the problem is and how that problem could be solved. So all of these materials are available in different formats. And I just want to show these to you really quickly. So they're downloadable as PDFs, which I showed earlier. There's a Google Classroom, which if any of you all are using Google Classrooms, I can share this with you. I need to share it with you directly, unfortunately. I haven't been able to figure out how to create something like a Google Doc where it automatically copies it. But all the teacher lesson plans are in there, the introduction and resources, the interactive lab notebook, links, and then lesson by lesson, all the materials you would need to teach each lesson. I've already showed you the interactive student notebook where students can then just click on it and add text. Clearly, you'd need to make a copy for each student individually, so they're not overwriting each other. And if you have questions about how to do that, I'm happy to share that with you. I heard from some districts that they're using Canvas. So all of this is also built in Canvas. So you can go through and do all the different lessons and modules through Canvas. So it has those same questions, the guiding questions in this lesson, what the students will do. It has links to some of the different cards and different activities that they need. So they could click on there and it'll download the PDFs. And then it has assignments that are also in here where they can reply with what they noticed so that there is group discussion, etc. So I wanted to go back to our breakout rooms and just do a quick conversation about how you think that you'll apply this in your school setting, how it'll work, what pieces you're concerned about, and then come back to the big group with any questions that you might have. So I'm going to put you back into your breakout rooms. And your goal, once again, is to discuss how do you think you'll implement this in your classroom? If you will, what are the things you're concerned about? And then come back to the big group with questions that you have that you want to go over. And I'm going to give you 10 minutes with the assumption that you're going to spend a couple of those minutes maybe running to the restroom. So we'll be back here at 12:35. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully had good conversations. I just want to take any questions that people have, anything you want to go back and look at, any questions you have about the flow or any of the lessons. can either drop it in chat or unmute yourself. Give just another minute in case anybody's typing. So no major questions. That's great. I'm going to drop my email right now into chat so that if you do have any questions, or if you want me to share the Google Classroom with you, I have to do that individually. So you should have my email already because that's where things came from. Oh, Jeannie, I really like this unit. I think it's well designed and better than one of the curriculums I use, honestly. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we spent a year really working on it. So any feedback you all have, love to hear it. Love to hear things that worked, and would also love to hear things that didn't work. Series. I do not have any big posters, Gloria. That's something that if you're interested in, it would be great if you would share that. So Annie is the one who works for the Southwest Fire Science Consortium. So Annie, that's maybe something to think about as an extension. This curriculum right now is just in middle school, Paul. However, while I'm working with Apple on potential, Apple and Annie on potential extensions at other grade levels. So Annie took that message about posters and is thinking about ways to maybe think about that. That would be great. Are there any images, Gloria, that you would be specifically interested in for seeing turned into posters, or anyone else, things that you'd specifically like to see as posters? Right now we have it, I figure a lot of you have different grade levels, so maybe projection during the class and then taking it down, but that's not necessarily what you want. So think about if there's specific images you'd like to see turned into posters. And you can drop that in chat. Respiration maybe, and the tree rings. Okay. Great. Yeah, it would be easy to size those up in Canvas and turn those into printable things. So Annie, when I forget, will you remind me that we're going to do that? Other questions or things that you think would be helpful for this? And I'm happy to help you with things along the way, or if you need a visiting person to come in online into your class, happy to do that as well. So fire, respiration, tree rings. Excellent transition, Jeannie. Thank you so much. That is the next thing we're talking about. I always love it when somebody cues the the next slides. Perfect. So I am next going to turn it back over to Apple. And did I share the right thing? Oh, let me stop share and start share again. I think I totally selected the wrong document. Okay. Oop, wait. Okay.
Yay.
There we go. Yay.
Great. Yes, thanks, Jeannie, for queuing that up. I work with a group of interagency fire managers, scientists, firefighters, and I can say there's definitely interest in engaging with all of you and your students. All the folks that we've talked with, Amali and I have talked with, they're very supportive and interested in this curriculum because they have an interest in telling a more science-based and nuanced message than with the traditional Smoky Bear programs that we often think of associated with land managers. And so the sorts of things that they're typically best suited to support are hands-on elements like the burning of the pans in lesson 6. And they're also great at talking about careers in fire and their experience with fire ecology and their educational backgrounds. There's also opportunities to connect, with opportunities for students who are a little older than yours, but to plant the seed that even as young as about 15, they can join Youth Conservation Corps programs and do summer work. They're not going to be lighting fire doing that, but they could be doing some restoration work, or they could be out on the land helping thin areas that are subject or high risk for burning. And so there's a way that they can get hands-on pretty soon as they get a little older. Next slide, please. And I have a colleague in Prescott, and she always likes to say, she says the careers in the Forest Service, and I would say especially in fire, are from books to boots. Whatever your students might like to do, if they really want hands-on getting dirty each day, the firefighting, it can be a good career for that. If they're more interested in the book learning and the science, academia is out there, and really everything in between. There are so many fulfilling and challenging careers in fire. And so that's one of the reasons I think this is such a great curriculum, because it has direct ties to educational pathways, career pathways, and really fulfilling careers for students. And I certainly see the way that our students are learning through a curriculum like this that's place-based, it's student-centered, it's standards aligned, and it can lead to those careers, and also really an informed citizenry that can provide feedback on land management decisions. And that's a lot of what the later lessons get at with the letters to land managers. And so I want to let you know about some of the resources we have available. When our folks go to classrooms, they have access to career trunks. There's certainly one for fire, but there's about a dozen different careers in natural resources that we have trunks for: forestry, wildlife biology, soil scientists, hydrology. And so they can come prepared with some tools of the trade, actual hands-on, tangible items that students can take a look at and touch. And they're prepared to also lead some activities. And so that's something our folks can bring when they come to a classroom. And then we also have some free resources and tools on our Forest Service website. I'll drop that address in the chat for you. And this has a handful of activity sheets, one of which you might be interested in is how to create seed balls. It's about native plants and what seed balls are, that mixture of soil and clay and plant seeds that can be put outside and serve as an extension, as an activity about restoration. And so that can be a really positive thing after having a challenging conversation sometimes about fire and the more negative aspects it can bring sometimes. Next slide, please. And lastly, I wanted to invite you all to a program that'll be taking place in a couple weeks. It is primarily focused on New Mexico educators, but I think those of you in Arizona would be welcome to sign up as well. And it's going to be taking place during New Mexico's official Outdoor Learning Week. And this is an outdoor learning symposium being led by Environmental Education of New Mexico. And there are going to be 2 afternoon sessions on Tuesday, September 27th and 29th. They're both virtual, they're both free. They'll be 4 to 5:30 p.m. New Mexico time, so 3 to 4:30 p.m. Arizona time. And I'll pop the link in the chat for the registration. And the first day is going to be focused on outdoor classrooms. And there will be 3 speakers from around New Mexico or across the state that are going to talk about outdoor classrooms in their schoolyards and how they came to be and strategies for using them. And then the second session on Thursday is going to be about standards aligned outdoor learning curricula. And that'll feature speakers from 3 outdoor and environmental learning groups in New Mexico. And they're going to highlight some great local outdoor learning curricula. And I think this to a large degree fits in there, although Molly will not be one of our speakers that day, but I think she'll be participating, as will I. And so I welcome you to join one or both sessions. They stand alone. So if you're able to make it, that would be great. And yeah, that's all I have to share, other than just thank you so much. It was great chatting with many of you. And I'm so impressed with all you do. And I just want to give you a big thanks for all you're doing and how you're helping students grow into wonderful adults. Thank you.
I'm going to stop sharing here. 2 additional things. The first is, if you are a classroom teacher, you will be getting a $100 stipend for attending today. Just so you know, it's going to probably take about 2 to 3 weeks to get that to you, because I have to send it to EENM, who's the fiscal sponsor for this workshop. And then they have to request the funding from New Mexico Game and Fish. And then once they get the money from Game and Fish, then the checks go out to you. If you haven't gotten anything within 3 weeks, if you would please shoot me an email and let me know, that would be really helpful so that I can then get on the phone and harass people. This is the first of these trainings that we've done. We've got another one scheduled for early November, but we'd love your feedback on how this went and how you plan on implementing it in your classroom so that then we can improve it. So I'm right now going to drop an evaluation into chat. If you would click on that link, and it should only take about 5 minutes to finish that. That's kind of our last piece today. So I'm here. I'll be in this room. I'll answer questions. I really want to thank Apple and Annie and teachers and nonprofit educators all for being here today. I know this is a Saturday morning and it's, at least here in Santa Fe, a beautiful day that it would be really fun to be outside. So hopefully you all will get outside at some point today. Please do complete that survey for the evaluation piece. And otherwise, I am here for questions.